So, How Learning Happens, this fantastic book we're working with, is going to also work with how memory happens. And what they're going to do is they're going to deal with the key paper that starts to show that the best way to think about it is to be careful of working with shallow processing. Over here, I'm just going to highlight it, although you can't see it. And that's when it's structural, when it looks like something, and that results in a weak memory trace. And then you could also have something which sounds like, it sounds similar, like a rhyme. That's acoustic. That's also weak. And what we're going to look at is the fact that if you really want to remember something properly, what you've got to do is you've got to go for deep processing. And what that deep processing does is it works with meaning. You're trying to get your students to actually grapple with the meaning of something rather than with what it looks like or what it sounds like. So now on the one level you should say, well, man, that sounds like pretty obvious. On one level it is. But to say that it was a key paper which was done in the 1970s, right? Craik and Lockhart, and it was done in 1972, and they called it Levels of Processing, a Framework for Memory Research. And this really has been an absolutely key paper. And what they were doing was they were trying to not go against completely, but at that time, there was this kind of picture of how memory happened. And I just want to say that this picture is still true. It just didn't get at exactly why memory can become deep rather than superficial. So the initial story was something like this. You have a situation where you have an external input coming in, and then that comes into your sensory register, right? And in that sensory register, well, mainly it could be visual, although there are other sensory registers to do with touch and the way you taste and all that kind of stuff. But visual is really important. And what happens is that visual register then will go into short-term storage, and that can be auditory, verbal, or linguistic. And what can happen is that short-term storage then gets pushed into long-term storage, right? Audio, visual. I mean, not when I say AVL, that AVL is actually auditory, verbal, linguistic over here. It can be those different types of memories. And that's how you go from your sensory register to your short-term storage to your long-term storage. And Craig's account was to say, now hold on, this is true. Okay, you do have this visual sensory register. You do have short-term storage, which is auditory, verbal, and linguistic. And you do have long-term storage, which works in auditory, verbal, linguistic, and visual and temporal. It does work like that. But why do some memories stick and other memories not? And that takes us back to this picture over here, where what you've got to do is, rather than work with the structural way things look or what things sound like, rather try and develop deeply with what things mean as a teacher. So that's the article, and I think it's a really key article. And let's take a look at how they suggest you can work with this in your teaching. And the first thing is that you should encourage students to explore what is being studied on their own, and they must elaborate on it. And they call this elaborative encoding, right? So what they're trying to do over there, elaborative encoding, they're trying to relate it to other concepts, and by doing that, they're constructing a richer set of integrated memories of what's being studied. Now just think about this. Rather than getting the students to look at it and just associate it very superficially with what the thing looks like, and rather getting them to work with what it sounds like, you're getting them to engage with meaning making. Now, it's not only elaboration that you want. You also want them to think about the distinctiveness of what they've learned. How is it similar or different from other concepts and strategies? And that's a really important tool. So you don't just want them to make links, to elaborate. You want them to go, why is this different and distinct from other things which I've learned? Thirdly, you want them to relate the information to pre-existing knowledge. You want to make sure that they form connections between the new information and what they already have in their schemata That's going to enable it to get to a deeper level. You also want to work on application. How do you apply it to other situations in a different situation? So they don't only make sense of it in terms of elaborating on it. They don't only make sense of it in terms of what's distinct. They don't only relate it to their previous knowledge. What they also do is they start to apply it in different situations and in different contexts. Right? You can also get the students to rework what's been studied. You get them to put it in their own words. And that's why it's really important for students to actually rewrite stuff in a different way, or to make notes or mind maps. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to make a concept map and make sense of it in their own terms. Make it personal. Engage with their own personal experiences so that they can web it into their own lives and experiences. And finally, you want to make sure that you can transfer appropriate transferring, right? So when they process the information, they have to do it in such a way that you, as the teacher, will assess it. It's got to be done in a way where you, as the teacher, can check that they've actually made sense of it, right? They've got to try to imagine what it is that they're expected to do and learn. And then they've got to do it in a way which isn't just crazy and off the wall. They've got to do it in a way which works for the assessment process itself. So that's all I want to say about this, is that when you look at how memory works, you are going to find out about sensory registers. You are going to find out all sorts of stuff about auditory and visual ways that these registers work and how all your senses work. All of that's fantastic. But really, for you as a teacher, what you have to focus on is making sure that you get your students to make meaning with this stuff, to go for deep levels of processing. Because it's only when they do that, when they compare and contrast, make it personal, adapt it to situations, it's only then that's going to stick in long-term memory. And it's only then that they're going to build a web in their long-term memory that they can use to place other things in.